Today we're looking at how to set up stereo backing tracks for a live performance, which I've been asked to cover multiple times. Running stereo backing tracks isn't really my thing. I prefer a mono setup, and I'll have to make a separate video explaining why I prefer mono backing tracks over stereo. But in this video, I'll give you an example of how you can set up and run stereo backing tracks using a digital audio workstation. In this case, we're going to be using Logic through a MacBook Pro and an audio interface. Now, you can use any other type of software or device as long as it supports 4 outputs. So let's get into it. All right, so in this example, we're going to be using Logic, and I've just made a backing track for the song That's What You Get by Paramore. And you can see I've already made the backing track, and this is actually for a 3-piece band that consists of drums, vocals, and guitar. And we've taken a modern approach and added a couple of other extra things to it. So we have some bass guitar and some synths in the backing track. So let's have a listen, hear what that sounds like.
That's what you get. Starting with intro. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Verse. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so that just gives you an idea of the backing track we're working with. At the moment, the click track, the cues, and the backing track itself is all coming out of the main left and right stereo output. So those are 2 outputs, the left and the right, which gives you a stereo signal. Now, for my voice cues here, I want to send that to a separate output. I don't want it with the backing track. I need to create a separate mix for that one. So if I click on the button here for outputs, and I want to change that stereo output to something else, first of all, if I click over here, you'll notice I've only got stereo output and surround. Now, this has to do with your audio interface. What you need to do is you need to click on your preferences or your settings and change the input and output of your device to the audio interface that you're working with. In this case, I'm using the DL16S, and I'm going to apply those settings. You might be using a different audio interface, and that's totally fine. So once I go back to the output routing and I click on that button, you'll see that there are now more than just the stereo outputs. I now have got outputs 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, and these are automatically populated to be a stereo output. So I'm just going to change the cues to outputs 3 and 4, as well as the click track. Depending on what kind of audio interface you're working with, you might only have a couple compared to what I have. So now let's just change the click track to the outputs 3 and 4. And so now I've got the backing track set to my main left and right stereo output, which is outputs 1 and 2, and the cues and the click track set to outputs 3 and 4. I've now got 2 separate and independent stereo mixes. If you look down the bottom right side of the screen, you can see I've now got the stereo output, which is outputs 1 and 2, and outputs 3 and 4. So when I play back my track, just one second here, you won't have any audio, but you can see I've got the cues and the click playing, and down the bottom right, you can see they are coming out of outputs 3 and 4. So once the backing track starts playing, you can now see it's coming out of the stereo output, which is outputs 1 and 2, my main left and right, which is also going to be sent to the main front of house. Whereas the click track and the cues are going to be sent to a separate mix only to the in-ear monitors on stage. Now, if I just zoom out of the project for a bit, you can see this is just the entire track itself. But what you want to do when running stereo backing tracks is you want to have your entire gig, or at least your entire set, because you might be running set 1, set 2, set 3, have your entire set with all your tracks in one project or one file, so that every song will play one after the other. Now, it is important that you leave a little bit of room after each song, just in case you need to tune your guitar, if you want to interact with the audience, make a few announcements, and also just to give a little bit of time for all the musicians to prepare or get ready for the next song. Probably only like, I don't know, 3 seconds at the most. And the shorter the time that you keep between each track, the more seamless and smooth your set is going to flow from one song to the other. Now, if you've got the settings enabled, I don't have them enabled at the moment, but you can actually add markers at the top of your project indicating what song you're using or what song you're playing, markers that indicate whether it's a verse, chorus, bridge of that particular song you're working with. So making the backing tracks is probably one of the most time-consuming and behind-the-scenes groundwork that you need to establish beforehand, before you hit the stage. And you want to make sure that all the tracks in the entire project are at the same volume relative to each other so that there's no quiet songs versus very, very loud songs. So once you're happy with your backing track and you think you're ready to go and hit the stage and start setting up for the stereo backing tracks, let's move on to the next part and I'll show you how to set that up. All right, so when running stereo backing tracks, you need to be playing your tracks through a digital audio workstation, maybe some other device. There are other options out there, but the simplest one that I'm probably most used to is using a laptop running Logic, and you'll most likely need to be using an interface that supports at least 4 outputs. Your tracks have to be pre-mixed beforehand and make sure that they're all at a similar volume or the LUF levels are about the same. And you want to have each song one after the other with your preferred amount of time in between each one. Now you can run the entire gig in one complete file or project, or have it per set. And make sure that all your backing tracks, the backing instrumentation, is going to be sent to outputs 1 and 2, which is your main left and right. That's going to be sent to the main front of house. Your click tracks, however, and any cue points or count-ins that you have, those are going to be sent to outputs 3 and 4. They are not supposed to be heard by the audience. They are going to be heard through the in-ear monitors of the musicians on stage. With your software and your laptop ready to go, make sure that it's connected to the audio interface of your choice. In this case, we're using the Scarlett 4i4 audio interface, and that's connected using a USB cable. You're then going to connect the outputs 1 and 2 to a stereo DI. In this example, we're using a Mackie stereo DI, and outputs 1 and 2 are connected to the corresponding inputs 1 and 2 on that DI box. Next, you're going to take outputs 3 and 4 and connect it to a separate stereo DI box. So for this example, you need 2 stereo DI boxes. It doesn't have to be the Mackie stereo DI box. In fact, it doesn't even need to be an active DI box, just a passive DI box that supports stereo inputs. So just to recap, outputs 1 and 2 are going to your first DI box into inputs 1 and 2, which contains your backing track, and then outputs 3 and 4, which contains your click track and cue points and count-ins, is going to a secondary stereo DI box into inputs 1 and 2. Technically, you don't need to be using DI boxes for the setup, and I'll explain why near the end of the video, but let's just carry on from here. So now you're going to take the left and right output of the first DI box and plug that into channels 1 and 2 of your front of house mixer. In fact, it doesn't actually need to be channels 1 and 2. You can choose whatever channel you want. Just for the purpose of this example, I'm using inputs 1 and 2 of a Mackie DL16S, which is a wireless mixer. I have done a review on this you can check out as well, but let's carry on through the tutorial. Now you're going to take the left and right output from the second DI box into inputs 3 and 4 of your front of house mixer. Again, it doesn't have to be inputs 3 and 4 of the mixer. You can choose whatever one you want. And remember, the first DI box is containing the backing tracks, which you want your audience to hear. The second DI box is going to contain the click track and any other things that you don't want the audience to hear, but you need your musicians to be able to hear on stage. Now that everything is going to the main front of house mixer, you're just going to ask your sound engineer to send the backing track as well as the click track and cues and count-ins to the in-ear monitors for the musicians on stage. The soundie also needs to send the backing track and only the backing track to the front of house. You don't want your audience hearing the clicks and the count-ins. The in-ear monitors serves a really good purpose that it's going direct to the musician's ears, which means the audience will not hear any on-stage clicks, count-ins, or things that shouldn't be heard by the audience. Using in-ear monitors is also a really good way to keep the on-stage noise level down and protect musicians' hearing. Now in this example, I'm using the Phoenix Pro PTM10. I have done a review on this one. You can check that out. I'll put the link in the description. You can see I've taken outputs 1 and 2 of the front of house mixer and sent it to the left and right inputs of the in-ear monitor transmitter. Depending on the size of the mixer or how many channels your mixer supports, it is important to know that running a stereo setup is going to occupy 4 inputs of your front of house mixer. So in the diagram, you can see both of the DIs, which are running stereo, are occupying channels 1, 2, 3, and 4. That means I've got 12 other channels that I can work with for my band. You might run into a situation where 12 channels is not enough for your band, in which case I would highly recommend you look at possibly using a mono backing track setup, which again, I'll put the link in the description for a setup like that. And another thing to consider is if you're running stereo backing tracks, it means that you're also going to be having a stereo monitoring system. So in this example, my mixer has 6 mono auxiliary outputs, but because I'm linking them together to create a stereo mix, I only have 3 monitoring mixes that I can work with. So outputs 1 and 2 have been combined to make a stereo mix, and same for outputs 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And then finally, your front of house mixer will just use the main left and right outputs to go to the front of house speakers. Now, I did say before, you don't need to be using stereo DI boxes. In fact, you don't need to use any DI boxes for running a stereo backing track setup for live performance. Before I show you how to do that, I just want to explain a couple of reasons why I prefer using a DI box. Starting with what I think is probably the most important thing is the ground or lift switch. Basically, this is a switch that helps resolve unwanted buzzers or unwanted signals and hums and grounding and earthing issues that you might come across from the audio and the signal being processed from the software, from your laptop, going into the audio interface. There's a whole bunch of issues and a whole bunch of things that could cause some kind of unwanted signal or noise through your signal chain. I mostly come across this when the laptop is charging. So when my laptop is charging and I'm playing a backing track from it, I'm usually hearing some kind of buzzing or humming through the noise or through the mix. And so this switch on the DI box helps eliminate that noise. Another reason why you might want to use DI boxes is the use of the pad switch. So let's say you've got your backing track coming in through your audio interface, and for some reason the signal is running way too hot, like it's just way too loud, and once it makes its way to the front of house mixer, the signal is just too loud to process or too loud for the sound engineer to work with, even if they're using a pad or switch on the desk. So the DI box helps lower the signal coming from your backing track or from your laptop going into the main front of house mixer. And lastly, one of the other reasons why I think it might be a good idea to use a DI box when running backing tracks is the THRU outputs. Basically, it's taking a direct copy of the signal received from the audio interface. So on the DI box number 1, I've got a copied signal of my backing track. And in DI number 2, I've got a direct copied signal of the click track and the count-ins and cues. And if you're wondering, why would I need this and how am I actually going to use this on a live performance or a live setting? Like, what's the purpose of having a copied signal? Well, let's say it's not a live performance. Let's say it's a band practice and you want to record it, and having a separate signal of the backing track and the click track going into an audio interface when recording just makes it easier in the post-production or the mixing stage of what you've captured during your band practice. This is also really helpful if you're live streaming and you need some more independent control over the backing track and the click track and what your audience is hearing. And also you can take the same backing track and click track and send it to another monitoring device, like another preamp or another in-ear monitor system or another separate mixer. So having these extra copied signals being sent elsewhere is just something really handy to have. So those are the 3 reasons why I prefer using a DI box when running backing tracks for a live performance. You don't necessarily need them, you can make do without them, and it's probably something that you might not need at all, and it's not something you're interested in. But it might be worth just having it there just in case. But maybe this next clip might change your mind just a little bit.
7 seasons on the ice and I've never seen a gun save someone's life.
I don't plan on using it.
Then why bring it?
Same principle as a condom.
So yeah, it's probably worth just having it and not needing it rather than needing it and then not having it. That's pretty much how I would look at it. Okay, so as promised, here's an example of how you can run these stereo backing tracks without using a DI box. Just like before, you're going to take outputs 1 and 2 from your audio interface, which contains your backing track, and send it to your front of house mixer. In this example on the DL16S, because it's a jack connector, I'm going to have to use inputs 9 and 10. You might be using something different on your mixer, just work with what you've got. And now I'm going to take outputs 3 and 4 from my audio interface, which contains my click track and my count-ins, and send it to my front of house mixer on channels 11 and 12. Same thing as before, you're going to take your in-ear monitor system and you're going to take a stereo output from your front of house mixer. In this case, it's outputs 1 and 2 of the auxiliary sends, and I'm sending it to my in-ear monitor transmitter. But still, at the end of the day, my preferred method is to use a DI box, and you may not need it, you probably don't want to use it, that's totally fine, but at least use this diagram as an example to help get you started. You've got 2 options. You can either use the DI box or you don't have to use the DI box. Just work with what you got, do a bit of trial and error and see what works. And I guess a really important thing is before you hit the stage, your entire band needs to actually test this out in a rehearsal and see how everyone feels, especially if you're not used to using in-ear monitors. Everyone has to feel comfortable using in-ear monitors on stage. So the best way to do that, practice. Do a band rehearsal, try setting it up, try doing some recording and see how it sounds. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope this video was helpful for people that are wanting to run stereo backing tracks. If you want to try and explore the mono setup for backing tracks, I'll put the link in the description, and also a couple of other links to some of my reviews on the Mackie DL16S, which is a digital wireless mixer, as well as the Phoenix Pro PTM10 in-ear monitor system. Thanks for watching. See you next time.